Hello everyone and welcome to Edusurg Clinics. We are nearing end of our discussion on descriptive statistics, and this is going to be a very simple video if you have understood the past concepts of variance and standard deviation. We are going to solve one or two actual questions that are asked on variance and standard deviation in a stepwise fashion. And we will also look at how to interpret your answers, because most important point in doing statistics is to reach an interpretation. Now, when you want to calculate the sample variance, okay, S square is variance, as we have already seen. The first step is finding the mean, which is X bar. Then subtract the mean from each data point and square the result. So you get Xi minus X bar the square and sum them. Once you have summed them, you divide it by n minus 1. That is when you get the variance. Remember, as we have discussed in the previous video, that variance has no unit. Now, if you want the standard deviation, it's very simple. It is the square root of variance, and standard deviation has the same unit as each sample value. Calculate the coefficient of variation if it is asked. Remember that it is in percentage, as we have already seen. And the formula to calculate coefficient of variation is standard deviation divided by mean. Like I said, these are all looking at clustering and outliers, very simple concepts. If you want to calculate the z-score, the formula is xi minus mean upon standard deviation, more or less the reverse of coefficient of variation, but x minus. Okay, the z-score can be negative or positive. What we do is -3 and +3 are our limits. Some points you need to remember because explaining them needs very extensive calculations. Easier to remember that between minus and +3 is a value that is not an outlier. If z-score is below -3 or above +3, it is an outlier. So if you remember all these steps, this basically covers your entire measures of dispersion. Any question that is asked on this topic can be solved with these steps. So now remember these formulas. These are for sample. S square is variance. Standard deviation is root of variance. Z-score is X minus mean upon SD. Coefficient of variation is standard deviation upon mean into 100. Now we already seen our store example in detail. So we will go in depth into that example. Suppose you have two stores, okay, and you are looking for a random mix of cereals in the sale, which has around say 10 packets in a single box, and you want to identify a box which has less fluctuation, or you want to identify the Mr. Reliable box, right? How do you identify, or how do you do that? What you can do is you look at the random number of cereals and look at calorie per 100 gram across different brands. Now, store A shopkeeper and store B shopkeeper are trying to sell you their products, so they give you these values. But now it is on your deductive mind to identify if one of the shopkeepers is trying to fool you. Whenever you get questions where words are fluctuation, uncertainty, reliability, volatility, noise, or inconsistency, low or high, your examiner is asking you to find variance and standard deviation. Remember this: fluctuation, low fluctuation, high fluctuation, low uncertainty, high uncertainty, reliable, not reliable, volatile, not volatile, noise, inconsistent, consistent. All these words basically want you to calculate variance or standard deviation. So now let us calculate the variance and SD for both the stores, and then we will see how to interpret it. So for store A, we have seen the steps. So first step is calculating the mean. I have simplified the calculation for you here. The mean is 145.5. Now subtract the mean from each data point. So you can see that that is what we are doing here. Subtract the mean from each data point and square the result. So for S square, you sum all these values, divide by n minus 1 because this is sample formula. So you get variance as 2784.50. As I have said, variance has no unit. When we do root of variance, that is standard deviation, and the value is 52.77. calories. Now, because we are going to compare two data, we can also look at coefficient of variation. But here the data are not very variable. And so even variance and SD will give you good answers, but you can do coefficient of variation. And for this data, SD divide by mean, that is 52.77 divide by 145.5, answer will come to somewhere around 36.27%. What you can do is do similar calculation for store B before going ahead in this video. Okay. Calculate the variance, calculate the standard deviation using these formulas. Remember the formulas, or once you do 10-15 examples, you will remember the formulas on their own. So coming to store B, if you have done the calculation, mean comes to 129, variance 5183.3, SD is 72 calories, and coefficient of variation is 55.81%. Compare this to store A, values we have already calculated. Now a very simple calculation. Remember the two words, give or take. Okay, so give or take is standard deviation. Give or take for store A is 52, for store B is 72. What does that mean? That means that the variation is higher in store B. Okay, look at the variance values, 5183, 2784. Variation is higher in store B. Coefficient of variation, or how much is the variation? 55% versus 36%. Again, the Mr. Reliable is store A. If you want to interpret this data, the interpretation is that the fluctuation in the random mix of cereal from store A is less than that in store B, as given by less variance, less standard deviation, and less coefficient of variation. Therefore, order from store A, which has a more consistent calorie predictability, a more reliable source. So this is how you can solve a question of this type. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to give you a self-assessment question. We have done mean median calculation. We have seen range. So this is a summary of all the videos that we have done so far. If you have not seen, I would suggest that you see those videos. We have around 10 videos now where we are nearly completing the descriptive statistics, barring some miscellaneous topics which we are going to cover in the next video. And then we will go towards probability and hypothesis testing. So what you do is solve this problem and then look at the answers. Okay. The answer slide is here. Mean is 36, median is 33.5, variance is 233.11, SD is 15.268, range is 54. So I hope that helps you in understanding the concepts, and this series gives you confidence on approaching statistics in a very practical manner. We have not seen more than 6 or 7 formulas in this entire series, and still you can identify and understand your statistical concepts if you apply the conceptual knowledge that is given in this series. Thank you.